It's Professor Marino again, as you know, because you went to Professor Marino's YouTube page. Can you ever have enough Hamlet? Clearly, Kenneth Branagh doesn't think so, because he has filmed the entire script of Hamlet, no cuts, every line, 4 hours and 2 minutes. This is the only time in theater history, in cinema history, this has been done. The entire script has been played on stage before, but this is the only film that doesn't cut the text. But as an aside, even the idea of an uncut Hamlet is a little bit of a myth. There is no book from Shakespeare's lifetime or just after with all of these lines in it. What we call the complete Hamlet is actually a combination of two different versions of this play. There are 3 printed versions in and after Shakespeare's lifetime. We've combined our favorite 2 into one big Franken Hamlet that is monstrously long. But you notice that gives us evidence that in Shakespeare's time, they never necessarily did the whole thing. There is no printing that has the whole thing. But for Branagh, you got to have as much Hamlet as possible. And that's not the only kind of maximalist strategy Branagh is using here. This is maximum Hamlet. At least the whole text, maybe a little more, what we can add through just visuals. And we can't possibly have enough star power for this movie. Beautiful widescreen Technicolor. Now, in some ways, this is like the Much Ado About Nothing we've seen. We have a mix of British stage actors and like RSC people, like Branagh himself, like Richard Byers, who's playing Polonius, like Brian Blessed, who's playing the Ghost, like Derek Jacobi, who is actually himself one of the great Hamlets of the second half of the 20th century. Kind of after Olivia and Gielgud, you get Jacobi and Burton, and then you move on to another generation. Now he's aged out of Hamlet. Now he's playing the king. But we also have with them a bunch of Hollywood stars. In Much Ado, it was, enough to get a couple big Hollywood stars. Let's get Denzel Washington. Let's get Michael Keaton. They're big stars, and now we have a kind of American presence. We get Robert Sean Leonard from Broadway and from the movie The Dead Poets Society. In this movie, it appears that Branagh has gone out to get everybody. As just like there can't be enough text, there can't be enough star power. So we have Oscar winner Julie Christie playing Gertrude. She won her Oscar for Dr. Zhivago back in the 60s. We have Charlton Heston playing the player king. Of course, Oscar winner for Ben-Hur, and not an Oscar winner, but a great film, the original Planet of the Apes. We have 2-time Oscar winner Jack Lemmon playing Marcellus, who's like guard number 1 in the opening scene. And if you read your Handel book, you see Handel kind of sneers a little bit at how Lemmon reads the lines. Well, Lemmon was very late in his career. He'd never been classically trained. Maybe that's not the best Marcellus you've ever seen. On the other hand, what are you doing casting a 2-time Oscar winner, kind of Hollywood Hall of Famer, to play guard number 1? It's crazy. It's over the top. This is a maximalist Hamlet in every sense of that word. The whole text, maybe a little bit more, all the stars you can have, and stars you can't possibly need. When Polonius is talking to his messenger Rinaldo, sending him to France, that little part is played by Gérard Depardieu, greatest living, most famous living French film actor. At the end, we have Sir Richard Attenborough comes in, Oscar for director, comes in to be the English ambassador. It's crazy. I started to play a game counting all the Oscar winners on the screen. It gets to double digits pretty fast. If you count nominations, you're getting into the dozens here. You don't need this much star power for these tiny parts. But there can't possibly ever be enough for this. Hey, want to play Hamlet today? Yes, yes. Say hello to everybody. Okay. I don't know why he loves the camera. He's just like that. This is also, now some other things are familiar here too from the Much Ado. We are on location. We're in Blenheim Palace, the palace of the Dukes of Marlborough. It's where Winston Churchill grew up. And we're on location in this genuine palace in England. In fact, you can see the Duke of Marlborough for a minute at the end of the movie. Yeah, the Duke of Marlborough is in this movie too. Everyone is in this movie. You can't possibly leave anybody out. And you see we're doing period costuming again. And we're actually moving closer to now, instead of the kind of beginning of the 19th century, we're to the middle or the late 19th century, right before the 20th century begins. This allows, especially in the Fortinbras plot, to be some political echoes of the oncoming, the approach of World War One, where kind of we view the 20th century as really getting started, and of the Russian Revolution, which history buffs will know happened kind of late in World War One. In fact, the charge of Fortinbras's army late in the film is deliberately meant to echo a revolutionary charge on the Winter Palace in the Russian Revolution. Some other things are happening here too. We have a lot of long following shots. This is also in a widescreen format, a prestige 70 millimeter format that is most famous for kind of great costume epics from the late 50s and up to the mid 60s. Movies like Ben-Hur, movies like Dr. Zhivago. And we have actors from those very movies in this too. Oh, I forgot to mention, we've made up characters to give famous British actors more parts. When Charlton Heston uncorks the speech from Aeneas' Tale to Dido, the kind of the story about Priam's slaughter, then we cut away to see Priam, King of Troy, and Hecuba, who are not in the script. They are not in Shakespeare's script. Even that whole script, Priam and Hecuba do not appear, but we cut away to them. And who do we cast? Sir John Gielgud, the thinking man's rival to Olivier, and Dame Judi Dench. That's Oscar-winning, Royal Shakespeare Company, bosses James Bond around, Judi Dench, who is in that movie for no reason to play Hecuba. The point is to get as much star power in here as possible. And we're in a glorious color widescreen, very lush. It doesn't need to be this way. And it's a movie that is all for all the world. It apes one of the great 1960s Hollywood costume epics. Though it really stayed an art house movie. It was never on even 100 screens at one time, and it didn't make a lot of money. This is an art house movie dressed up like the Hollywood blockbuster that should have gotten made years before, but never did. It's also, of course, in beautiful color. And this is partly a deliberate contrast to Olivier. Is Olivier wrong? Is Branagh wrong? No. But because Olivier's already made a kind of glorious black and white, moody noir version of this, Branagh has to go a different direction to separate himself from that movie, and that's not wrong. It's the same way that Whedon has to go black and white in some ways to separate himself from Branagh in The Much Ado. He needs to create a difference and to have a different take on the play to explain to the audience why we're doing this again. Why we're doing this again? Well, we're doing one of the things that we can say to play Branagh's advocate. In the Olivier film, well, if the whole costuming in the black and white all echoes what's happening in Hamlet's mind, it also erodes the difference between Hamlet and the rest of the characters. Everybody looks gloomy. Everybody's in black and white. Everybody's got shadows everywhere. It's film noir for everyone else in Hamlet's world. They're all just living in it, and that kind of Hamletizes them in some way. Here, the splendid color allows Branagh to differentiate Hamlet from the rest. The part of the point is that the rest of the court is not in mourning. He's the only one in mourning. Everybody else is celebrating the wedding. He's still locked in funeral mode. So we see those glorious court costumes. Derek Jacobi as king in that bright red uniform. Everybody happy, everybody wealthy, everybody kind of glorious 70 millimeter Technicolor, and Hamlet separated because he's the one in black. He's the one who is still feeling the darkness. He is visually out of touch with the rest of the court. And this is a totally legitimate take on Hamlet too. We have we see a lot of long shots again. Notice that especially when Hamlet has a long speech, Branagh just lets the camera run. He moves it around a lot. We substitute camera movement a lot for cutting and editing. The camera stays in a long take a lot of the time, and it follows characters around, even spins around them, without cutting away back and forth to different points of view. Now, with 4 hours, you got a lot of time. What comes in when you have the full leisurely 4 hours to spare? Well, we bring the politics back. We have three films. One that mentions Fortinbras, but he never really, they show him to us on a kind of TV screen. He never appears. We have Olivier, who just cut Fortinbras out entirely. And here we have a whole Fortinbras plot that's kind of even been beefed up from the text. There's more Fortinbras in this movie because we're adding some visuals there. And that allows a political dimension to Hamlet to make this not just a psychological play, not just a story of one man who could not make up his mind, not about one person's own internal struggle, but the problem of a nation. This is also something true about Hamlet the play. It is a political tragedy. That's why it's a tragedy. It's not just that this our friend that we're rooting for goes down and takes the rest of his family with him. He takes the whole royal family with him. His dynasty goes down. His kingdom's in trouble because, well, the family can't get it together. We have room for comedy, much more comedy. Branagh is a funnier Hamlet in a lot of ways than the other two we'll see. He spends a lot more energy on the comedy because he also has to create even more variety within Hamlet's part. But even with all that time, there's still, Branagh as maximalist is often showing us things that aren't in the script, making very aggressive, making his choices, showing us everything, sometimes removing doubts. What is the king thinking? Well, we're going to see what the king's thinking because Branagh's going to show us things that are clearly in the king's point of view. What went on with Hamlet and Ophelia before the play began? What happened before Act 1? Well, if you had any doubts, Branagh's going to make sure you don't have any doubts. This is a Hamlet without doubt, which is an unusual strategy. It takes away one of the things that Hamlet, the play, really is about on some level. And one last, it's also, Hamlet is a play about theater itself. It is meta-theatrical, and Branagh spends an enormous amount of time in that play within a play scene, both of the audience and, and he has Hamlet do even more acting than Hamlet does in the normal performance. But notice a little trick here. Now, there's a traditional stereotype about British versus American actors playing Shakespeare. It's not about nationality, it's not about where you grew up, it's about how you're trained. Americans are typically, especially film actors, are trained more in a kind of naturalistic style, often with the so-called Stanislavski method, which is about interiority, naturalism, where people who went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, like Ken Branagh did, tend to be trained, first of all, in the language, in the poetry, in classical acting, and the techniques to get them around the beautiful words. One of the things about the play within a play is that the actors are supposed to, in that play, the traveling players, are supposed to be a little hacky, a little cliched, a little outdated. They make the rest of the play look realer because they are fakier. They are a generation behind in theatrical technique. They're a generation behind Shakespeare in theatrical technique. So they're meant to be very old-fashioned. The joke here is that the most old-fashioned actor in the player king, the one who does Aeneas's Tale to Dido, who plays the king in the play within a play, with all that really, what's hacky about the play within a play? Well, all those rhyming couplets that seem a little stilted, not as natural as the rest of the language. He is played by an American. Old-fashioned actor, very much about the voice. I wish I had a voice like Charlton Heston had. But here, the normal stereotype that goes towards British actors, they're just about beautiful speaking voices, and they're a little old-fashioned and hammy. Here, the beautiful voiced ham, who's a little out of step, is the American, while the British actors are doing, attempting to be more naturalistic with the prose. Now, there's a lot more to talk about because it's 4 hours long, but I don't want this video to be 4 hours long. So that's that, and enjoy the film in glorious Technicolor, and next we'll talk about Almereda.